As a general rule, I don't judge movies just based on trailers. Filmmakers don't always get a lot of control over the final cut of a trailer. Sometimes you have to use footage that isn't finished, or maybe it's footage that'll end up being cut from the final film. Sometimes certain special effects haven't quite been polished, and so you can get the impression that the movie's worse than it is. I'm always happy when a trailer looks great. It's nice to have something fun to look forward to. I try to hope for the best, but reserve judgment about the worst. But there's always an exception to the rule, and the latest exception is the slow-motion train wreck that is Disney's Snow White. This movie's supposed to come out in the spring, and a teaser trailer came out a little while ago. It had computer-generated dwarfs, which looked like something from my nightmares, and computer-generated critters, which looked like something from my nightmares. But it didn't really tell us much about the plot. However, a second trailer has now come out, and it's not very encouraging. The dwarfs don't look any better. Really, why are they computer-generated anyway? Like, this is supposed to be a live-action version. We already have an animated version, and it looks a lot better than this. The trailer also told me something I've suspected for a while. This is not Snow White. The story we're going to get will have little to nothing to do with the beloved German folktale that was recorded by the Brothers Grimm over 200 years ago and has probably been around a lot longer than that. The leaked trailer shows a bunch of stuff I immediately hate, like computer everything ruining any sense of realism, the dwarfs on the Indiana Jones ride from Disneyland, and a preview of a new song that sounds absolutely nothing like the fantastic score of the original film, which was written by music legends Frank Churchill and Larry Morey. A modern girl boss anthem doesn't suit either the character of Snow White or the story she's in, and the sound of it is going to smack right up against the classic Golden Age Hollywood sound of the original score. The story also appears to be loaded with politics, which neither the original movie nor the original folktale had anything to do with. Snow White is less a Disney princess and more like Che Guevara in a frock. In this new trailer, we see Snow White standing up to the queen, insisting that the people need a little kindness. The evil queen then says, "You know, I don't really remember you being this opinionated." We later see Snow White storming the castle with a bunch of rejected extras from a community theater version of Les Miserables. Cavalry Captain Snow White marches up to the queen and declares, "This is our kingdom and now we're here to take it back." I will never understand why filmmakers tell stories that they hate. I mean, I get why Disney's done all these live-action remakes.
Oh, I like money.
Disney's live-action remakes are soulless, artistically bankrupt cash grabs, and some of them have been profitable. I won't complain about that because we live in a free society where we can spend our money on whatever junk we want to. We all have a list of movies that we know are garbage, but we like them anyway. Nostalgia and cheese may have hooked some of you on these Disney films. That doesn't work for me, but I won't be snobby about that because I unironically love films like Spice World and Plan 9 from Outer Space. So I totally understand when people like a film that's bad, especially when it was made by people who really tried to make something good. But what I don't understand is why a studio would want to make a film when they look at the story and go, "This does not meet my standards and it needs to be fixed." There are so many stories in this world, ones that we already know and love, and ones that we don't know yet, but that we will love. What I don't get is that somehow Hollywood has forgotten that they can tell stories that they love and make money. I feel really bad for Gal Gadot, because one thing I like in this trailer is her performance. We're only getting a tiny little glimpse of the film, but it's clear she put in a lot of effort, and she really transformed the evil queen into a flesh and blood character. The magic mirror looked pretty good too. So I guess there's two things I can try to be positive about. This movie has been plagued by problems from the beginning, and one of them is that the people making it haven't bothered to learn much about the story or why the original film is so beloved. I've spoken before about the kerfuffle over whether or not it would be offensive to cast little people in the roles of the seven dwarfs. The short version? It's not. And the other thing that's rankled me is Disney's attempt to make it seem like some sort of civil rights achievement because a half Polish, half Colombian, all-American girl was cast in the role of Snow White. I mean, everyone's family history is interesting, and at the end of the day, if she looks the part and can play it, fantastic. But your DNA isn't in and of itself an achievement. Of course, history is full of examples of groups of people who are oppressed by other groups of people, and sometimes it is a genuine breakthrough for representation when someone from a marginalized background is able to achieve something for the first time. But this hasn't happened here. On one side, yeah, some people have gotten way too fixated on the fact that Rachel Zegler is part Latina. But to me, the actress in costume looks pretty much like Snow White, so I don't care. And on the other side of things, Disney and its defenders have kind of made this big deal out of the actress's ethnicity, as if casting her was some huge, monumental first-time achievement. Except it wasn't. The original 1937 film actually achieved some groundbreaking representation decades before it was socially acceptable, let alone trendy. In the 1930s, when Snow White was made, Italians were still very much a marginalized ethnic minority in America. They were from Southern Europe and were mostly Catholic, which meant that they were often excluded from social and professional opportunities by the older, more established population of Northern European Protestants that made up most of the United States. Adriana Caselotti was born in the U.S. to Italian immigrant parents. Adriana's family went back to Italy for a few years when she was 7 years old. When they returned to America, Adriana not only had to be the new weird kid in junior high, but she had to relearn English. When Disney was looking around for the right girl to voice Snow White, the casting director rang up Adriana's dad Guido, who is now working in Los Angeles as a vocal coach. 18-year-old Adriana, who by now was a serious vocalist herself, eavesdropped on the call and blurted out that she could do it. And boy, could she. Her iconic coloratura soprano voice gave us Disney's first princess. Caselotti's exquisite expression, warmth, humor, and emotion has made millions of people fall in love with this story. Disney already had the story of a young, talented girl from a marginalized immigrant background whose family came to this country, hustled hard, and achieved something amazing. When drawing Snow White, they even gave her Adriana's beautiful wavy dark hair and expressive dark eyes. Disney already had their wonderful story of inclusion and representation, so why have they been pretending all this time that it's not the case? This unnecessary spat over identity politics is extra frustrating because it's often used as a way to deflect from what most people really object to about the movie. It's mangled the original story and tacked on a bunch of modern-day social and political messaging. The people making Snow White don't have any respect for the original story or characters, but they still want to use them because the brand recognition means raking in more money. My grandma always said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The story of Snow White wasn't broken. It didn't need to be fixed by modern-day filmmakers with a hubristic belief that they know better than hundreds of years of folklore tradition. That doesn't mean you have to like folk tales like Snow White, because to summon another cliche, not everything will be your cup of tea. That's certainly how my husband feels when he sees me sipping on a nice frothy oat milk matcha latte. If you don't like the story of Snow White, don't tell it. Just don't break a story and then be surprised when nobody wants it. Adaptations don't have to be exact. In fact, they usually shouldn't be because written stories and live storytelling are very different from film. But filmmakers should at least respect the story they're telling. If they don't, how on earth are moviegoers supposed to? Snow White stands in stark contrast to a remake that just came out, the best Christmas pageant ever. This is a film with an incredibly low budget compared to this upcoming Disney disaster, but audiences and critics love it because the filmmakers loved it. I recently watched an interview with director Dallas Jenkins. This is what he had to say about how he approached the text of the beloved 1972 novel written by Barbara Robinson.
I have to give credit to Barbara Robinson, who came up with this story and wrote it so well and so beautiful that my job was to not screw it up, and then to enhance the spots that in the book are just, briefly mentioned, but now because they're key moments of the story, I have to show them on screen and capture the spirit and the intention of the book and the brilliance and wit of it.
There, right there. That's how you do an adaptation or a remake. The passion and love that Jenkins feels just radiates out of him, and I can't help but feel that love too. The Best Christmas Pageant Ever does make some changes and add a bit to some of the characters. But these changes made the film stronger and more interesting because they were done with love and care for the story rather than contempt. I wanted this new version of Snow White to be good because I'm really passionate about the lives and work of the Brothers Grimm. The fields of folklore and linguistics would not be what they are today without their work, and they were the first to really fight for the idea that the stories of ordinary people mattered just as much as hoity-toity tales jotted down by rich folks. The stories they wrote down weren't broken. They don't need to be fixed by Hollywood snobs who think they're better than everyone else. This is a rare case where I can write my review before the film even comes out. How many Snapes does Snow White get based on its faithfulness to the source material? None. It gets none. The story changes revealed in this fairly short trailer are so massive that I can honestly say this isn't Snow White. Even if there are elements from the original tale in there, the things they've gotten wrong are so big that once I've seen the film, it'll probably end up with a negative score. But what do you think? Are you going to go see it? I'm kind of torn between not wanting to reward something that has so much contempt for a story that I love, but then also feeling that I need to be honest, follow through, and actually see a film before I deliver my final judgment. I'd love to hear from you about how you're going to handle this, but in the meantime, we'll always have that original story. We can always keep discovering it and loving it. And even if someone else disrespects it, that does nothing to tarnish the legacy of a beautiful story that very much belongs in the literary canon of children's stories.